Remember, we were talking about recession and inflation, and we're going to be continuing down that track. So in your heads, please switch gears. And even as we look at the geopolitical factors and levers, keep in mind that this is in the context of how it's going to lead up to the scenario that Elder Wee was sharing with us from the Revelations. So when we look at the recession in 2010, it was quite a heavy hit that we went through as an organization. I mean, as a country. I mean, as a people, as a race, and we saw the Treasury Department spending upwards of $400 billion. By 2010, the banks paid back a little more than what was spent by the Treasury Department, and then unemployment was still above 10% in 2010. And why is that pertinent? Why is that important? The inflation that we're seeing today is despite the fact that the interest rates are being kept low, okay? And if you look at the interest rates globally, most countries are keeping the interest rates below 1% or even close to 0%. And in spite of that, we're seeing the world economy inflate at a very alarming pace. We're seeing people, there's more currency that's being printed. People are feeling less poor because suddenly there's more money in the economy. They have literally more money in their hand, in their accounts. However, the currency devaluation is waiting to happen. And the devaluation is when the tipping point takes place. The tipping point is where the CBDC, or the central bank digital currency, will be introduced. And I will give you a short overview of that in a bit. When we look at the highest debt ever, in terms of the United States, most recently, they once again passed a $1.5 or $1.7 trillion stimulus to keep the debt ceiling, continue to keep raising the debt ceiling. And that's not safe in any economic context. And yet we're seeing that reckless abandon with which currency is being printed. Think about it this way. The more you have of something, the less value it has. Okay? And the same thing applies for currency. And when we look at the US dollar and the military stability, we realize that there's something going on, because the United States has really pulled out of so many of their bases, even from 4 years ago, where the stability of the world is now becoming compromised at so many levels. And we'll go through that in a little bit in terms of how it affects the geopolitics. Now, China and Russia, remember we did a unipolar, bipolar, and multipolar world in a previous session. However, with the US becoming weaker politically, we're not seeing a commensurate increase, an automatic increase in the influence of Russia and China, because they themselves are going through their own turmoil and chaos. So if you look at the military presence that the United States had abroad, it pretty much covered the world. And what we're seeing increasingly is that they are moving out of large swaths of areas like Afghanistan, Pakistan, even in the South China Sea. The bases that they used to have reduced despite rising tensions, in fact, contributing to rising tensions in the region. So when you think about the rising government debt, percentage of normal GDP in China, this is a very stark picture. And I've not covered 21 yet because they haven't released the numbers. This is a number that they have, that we have acquired, because China does not release numbers automatically, but using a bunch of economic calculations, we're seeing how there's an incremental, tendency towards debt from a government perspective in China, despite the fact that their GDP is still stable. When you look at the United States, it's the same. The federal debt held by the public, extremely high as we sit at the pandemic, and it's not going to get any better. At the current rate, it's going to be projected at over 200%. And this is something that's almost irreversible. And you'll understand in a bit why that this is not being controlled deliberately, right? The mother of all bubbles is with China. If you look at the Shanghai Real Estate Price Index, it's going through the roof. But from 2001 to 2017, it had already hit 700% increase. Why is this? Now ask yourself, why is this important? This is important because if China did not have to deal with the inflation, they would automatically have been able to step into the vacuum that the USA is leaving across the world. Be it the One Belt, One Road project, which would have given them brilliant access, there's lots of promise around that, or the international trade, with China being the manufacturing back office or the manufacturing hub of the world, or be it the debt that it's bought out of the United States. We would have been able to see a much stronger resurgence in China if it had not been the case in terms of its real estate market. So the upswing that we're seeing in borrowing is also not relegated only to China. The Chinese debt dwarfs its economy. So when you look at the corporate spending, the household spending, the government spending, and the bank spending, on every parameter, we're seeing that there is a ticking time bomb that's building up here. If you look at the debt breakdown in China, the non-financial corporates hold the highest debt. And it's not reducing as we speak, because in July 2019, it was already 310%, the debt to GDP ratio. Untenable. I mean, people are beginning to throw out their economic theory on the face of what they're seeing both in China as well as in the US. A $3.5 trillion debt increase in debt will push it to levels not seen since World War II. And think about it, there has still not been war. And you might wonder, what has war got to do with debt? We'll cover it in a bit. So there are red flags all over the place. With the pandemic, even though the economy seems to be going strong by all the main indicators, we know that there is unemployment, extremely high unemployment in 2020 and 21. If you look at the stock market, stocks emerging from the COVID crash, it's a red hot run that they're going on. And if you try to juxtapose unemployment rates with the rise of the stock market, you once again begin to wonder what's going on. I mean, how is it even possible? We also see the rich getting richer. All the billionaires, every single billionaire, grew their wealth a minimum of 60% in the last 2 years. When in fact, globally, the people who live below the poverty line is approaching 20% of the global population. I'm not even talking about unemployment. I'm not talking about lost jobs or any of that. I'm just talking about simple poverty line being raised to accommodate more people under it. How is that something that lives side by side, juxtaposed with each other? You have the billionaires getting richer on the back of technology, on the back of logistics, on the back of being able to aggregate through the digital transformation of their organizations, global footprints in a way that's efficient. And then if you look at who owns 99% of the global corporate world, take any company, and if you go and look at who the investors are, two names come up. And I'm just going to leave it here for you to do your own research. Vanguard and BlackRock. Vanguard and BlackRock will be found as investors or listed as investors in every single company on the face of this planet, either by direct or cross or indirect holding. And you won't be able to break that down to see who owns Vanguard or who makes up BlackRock. Though we have the information in the public domain, Vanguard and BlackRock, they're the ones who are making all the money, despite the fact that the pandemic has been brutal for most of the world. So when you look at inflation in the form of a price of a coffee cup, right? When you buy a cup of coffee in 1970, it was 25 cents. In 2019, it was nearly $2. Now it's approaching $4 in just 3 years. And why is that important? Let's try and understand how the Bank of International Settlements is using the approaching chaos as a way to introduce what they're calling a more secure, a more transparent economic system.
Our analysis on CBDC, in particular for the use of general use, we tend to establish the equivalence with cash. And there is a huge difference there. For example, in cash, we don't know, for example, who's using a $100 bill today. We don't know who is using a 1,000 peso bill today. A key difference with the CBDC is that central bank will have absolute control on the rules and regulations that will determine the use of that expression of central bank liability. And also we will have the technology to enforce that. Those two issues are extremely important, and that makes a huge difference with respect to what cash is.
So he's basically saying that for reasons of safety, transparency, and trackability, they're going to introduce the central bank digital currency. They will offer it at a time when the inflation reaches such a rate that people will be carrying bags of money that have no value. It's not very far, but when it comes, it'll come with such force that these people, the BIS, will step in along with the World Economic Forum and offer the world a solution. And the world will just take it. Because along with the solution, you will get things like debt relief, meaning all debts that you have will be pardoned if you come onto the scheme. Think about that. Who in their right minds will say no? But along with that, all things of value that you hold will also need to be declared. And when it's declared, you will get in exchange of that value, central bank digital currency credit. I will break that down in another session, but I want you to understand how all of these levers are being manipulated and allowed to play out so that they can offer you a solution. I talk about political strategy, a socio-political strategy called the Hegelian dialectic. The Hegelian dialectic is one where they create the problem and they cause the confusion or the chaos, and then they offer the solution. We've seen that happen with 9/11. Even before that, we've seen that happen with the assassination of JFK. We've seen that happen with the pandemic. And now with the economic systems overheating, we will see that happen with the digital currency being introduced as well. So what is capital? Capital is money when it becomes large enough that it becomes an entity in and of itself, normally used for investing. So money by itself is capital, and you use it for investing in projects, investing in instruments that eventually give you returns. But what's the real economy? The real economy, as it is experienced, which is your wages, your salary, okay? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? The cost of living, is it increasing or is it decreasing? And what people actually want. That's the real economy. So you have capital on one hand, you have real economy in the other. And if you're going to, look at what's happening in the world out there, you read the new economic pages in your newspaper, and you look at your real life, you'll begin to see, even the most laymen among us will begin to see that gap, that increasing gap between capital and the real economy. And the reason why that is important to observe is because the bigger the gap, the bigger the difference, the bigger the crash that is waiting to happen. And people who are investing now in things like crypto and Bitcoin, I have a word for you all, a word of caution, but I'll come to that in a bit. Now, if you look at the income levels globally, it's very easy to see wherever you have the little tinges of blue is the high income, okay? High income level, which is more than $12,000 a year. That's what's classified as high income. The upper middle is classified as between $3,000 to $12,000. So these are not very big benchmarks. We're beginning to see the disparity of wealth across the globe. What you see as gray is not even in the legend. And it's really a telling sign of where we are headed as a global economy. And there's going to be a place, there's going to be a point in the next few years where something has to give, something has to change. If you look at the legends of people living in poverty, right? The number of people not in extreme poverty is green, and the number of people who are living in extreme poverty is the red mark. In 2015, that number had begun to come down. This is world poverty based on the World Bank. However, these are projections. And these are projections that are being made to lull us into a feeling of complacency. In fact, by 2021, the number barely goes past the 1 billion mark. And somehow, I believe that's not being honest. So when you look at the value of the dollar and the price of consumables in England, to give you a sense of how the two sort of relate to each other, you're beginning to see how the dollar has absolutely gone down to less than $10 of its original value in 1913. All right? And the more you look at figures like this, the more you begin to understand the rate at which the economy is overheating. You'll begin to understand that each of the stages that we've seen over the last few decades of crisis has contributed to the next level of this economic chaos that's coming. Let's see how a pandemic contributes to the same chaos.
Plague laws, this is not the first time in history that plague laws have been used to centralize control of transportation, control of labor, control of banking and bank accounts, control of all the different kinds of capital that make up human civilization. But the COVID laws are particularly draconian in the history of plague laws because not only do they control labor, transportation, banking, but now with advances in digital technology, we're looking at complete control through the banking system of 100% of all assets, ultimately. So what happens here? For many, many years, most of us have grown up in a world in the Western democracies where we have a balance of power between the bankers and the people. The central bankers control monetary policy, and the people vote for an electorate that controls fiscal policy. Now what we're watching with COVID laws all around the world is the central bankers moving in and exercising essentially a coup d'etat, where they take control of fiscal policy as well. And again, with the advances in digital technology, vaccine passports will not be about health. Vaccine passports are part of a financial transaction control grid that will absolutely end human liberty in the West. For many years, I have fought and written against central control of the financial system. We've centralized more and more capital, more and more control. And we've done it with tactics called divide and conquer. And we've all experienced many different divide and conquer tactics, men against women, Black against white. But now we have a new one called the vaccinated versus the non-vaccinated. Because if you're going to centralize control of every aspect of people's lives and literally strip them of their assets and their property rights, you need a new, more venal divide and conquer, and we can't let that happen.
So as you can see, with every crisis, they've used the opportunity to create a new control mechanism. Again, with 9/11, the way they control your travel changed drastically. You can't get into a hotel without your car being checked, at least in the third world, right? You can't get into an airport with multiple levels of checks, but also your bags and your stuff, maybe at least twice one way, right? All of that has been normalized because of what happened with 9/11. And there's a theory about that. It's more than just a theory. Similarly with the pandemic, there's one more level of loss of control that we've reached. Now listen to this guy who talks about the near future. I talk a lot about the Industry 4.0, and he gives us a really good picture of what the world is heading to. And he's an incredibly intelligent chap. He is a Jew, but he's also part of the system that's ushering in Industry 4.0. Worth listening, so please pay attention.
60 minutes overtime.
You have the agency that is in charge of hacking people. It is also in charge of protecting people from being hacked.
We can hack not just computers, we can hack human beings and other organisms. Organisms, whether viruses or bananas or humans, they are really just biochemical algorithms. And we are learning how to decipher these algorithms. When the infotech revolution merges with the biotech revolution, what you get is the ability to hack human beings. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human being? You need two things. You need
Please note that Yuval Noah Harari is one of the experts on the World Economic Forum. So if you're thinking that this is something that's on the fringe element who's talking about this, is not true. And this was well before the pandemic. This was in 2018. Okay, so if you think all of this is just happening now, think again.
A lot of computing power, and you need a lot of data, especially biometric data. Not data about what I buy or where I go, but data about what is happening inside my body and inside my brain. And maybe the most important invention for the merger of infotech and biotech is the biometric sensor that translates biochemical processes in the body and the brain into electronic signals that a computer can store and analyze.
DARPA led a couple of contracts back in 2011, 2012, the University of California, for what's called electronic telepathy, being able to monitor the brain activity of human beings at a distance and determine what they're thinking.
60 minutes overtime.
Control the
actually their thinking. And then on a second contract, actually developing complex signals, being able to send them into the brain of another person, literally transmit a message. This is where the technology is today.
Today, data is the most important asset in the world. Those who control the data control the future, not just of humanity, but the future of life itself. What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin.
Okay, so we know how they're doing that. We know the vehicle that they're using for that, and that's coming. And let's try and understand a little bit about how that technology works.
They call it part of the fourth industrial revolution.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are.
Please note who this is. This is the person who wrote the book, The Great Reset, COVID-19. And he also commissioned the paper called The Fourth Industrial Revolution, Merging of Human, Biological, and Digital Systems. Okay, so let's just watch that from the beginning.
Industrial revolution.
One of the features of this fourth industrial revolution is that it doesn't change what we are doing, but it changes us.
The very idea of human being some sort of natural concept is really going to change. Up until now, the conversation we've been having is around freedom of speech. Once we can access people's thoughts and access people's emotions.
The focus, as all of you know, today is on what's now called the Internet of Bodies, involving medical implants and other kinds of devices that go inside your body and all together with the Internet as a whole comprise the Internet of Bodies.
The Internet of Bodies, or IOB, is actually an ecosystem. It's a bunch of devices that are connected to the Internet that contain software and that either collect personal health data about you or can alter the body's function. We think of the Internet of Bodies as this collection of all these devices, as well as all the data that the devices are gathering about you. And in healthcare, it's Internet of Bodies has been around for quite a while.
So the Internet of Bodies, imagine the power of AI. What is artificial intelligence? It's a way to automate computation and cognition. So we can now automate learning, perceiving, doing computation. It's a pervasive general purpose technology that will be used in all of our industries, that will come into our professional networks, our private networks, our schools, our industries and our offices. What I wanted to epitomize with the Internet of Bodies is this notion that we will be under assessment, we will be under measure of computation in every aspect of our lives in the future, from what you eat, who you date, what you buy on the internet, how much energy you use, but also what are your vital signs? How well are you doing in terms of health? What kind of specific genetic quirks do you have? What's your genome telling about your health, about your mental health, about how well you are doing, how well you are aging, what kind of disease you are susceptible to?
It has a bit of an Orwellian twinge to it.
Well,
yeah. So Orwellian is the reference to George Orwell. If you haven't heard of that, the author, please look him up, George Orwell, and a book he wrote called 1984. And he wrote this book well before 1984. And when you read the book, you'll begin to see a very accurate description of 2021 at so many levels. I will not spend time on that today. With the remaining 8 minutes, I'd like to show you one more video. But this video is really about trying to understand how they're pushing the boundaries of technology to be able to use the vehicle of the vaccination route. And I want you all to make the connect at your own pace. But they're going to use the vaccination as a gateway to introduce these technologies that will get embedded in our system, in our body, for our safety, for our protection, for building back better, and so on and so forth. Once again, this is a World Economic Forum video. It is not made by any conspiracy theorist. And what the implication of this is that it will be the one step before the embedded quantum dot tattoo, which is something that I talk about in the future sessions as well. So what we'll do next time is we're going to look at the end of more. Till about 2015 to 2018, there was an aspiring for more. People wanted more. They wanted more of holidays. They wanted more of branded goods. They wanted more salary. They wanted more food. They wanted more luxury items. But we're getting to a place where we will not be able to own. And so the idea that there is the end of more is approaching is a really pivotal one. It's a paradigm shift that most of us will still struggle to understand. But the moment you look at what the World Economic Forum has painted for 2030, they start off by saying you will own nothing and you'll be happy. You'll begin to see that there's something to it. And I will go through that in detail next time. We're going to be talking about population growth, increasing competition, and decline in traditional religion and the role that that plays in preparing the ground for the Great Reset. With that, I'll hand back to you, Eldery.